Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping in to an Imperial barrel-aged coffee stout, specifically a beer from Fathers Brewing Company. This is only the second time I've reviewed a beer by this brewer, and this is actually a variant of the same beer I first reviewed, which was a 2018 release of this same beer called Wheelhouse. This specific beer is the 2020 release called Double Barrel Wheelhouse. It's 10% ABV and it's been both bourbon and whiskey barrel aged. So two separate barrels. Fathers Brewing Company is based in Valparaiso, Indiana. So a big barrel aged Imperial coffee stout. What's not to like? This is also going to be interesting. Granted, it's been several years since I had the 2018 release. Getting to try slight deviation on the beer that I've had before and be able to go back and kind of look at my tasting notes, compare scores when it's all done. I don't want to influence any of my thoughts on this beer, so I will wait till I have everything recorded fully, but it'll be interesting for me to go back and look at my data and just see how closely they align. But nonetheless, Double Barrel Wheelhouse today, just a nice clean label design on there, nothing too fancy. We've got a gold wax tip cap, so as always, our trusty pointy tipped bottle opener to score all the way around underneath the edge of that cap to help release that wax. This wax really cut pretty easily through by digging around. It really did a good job digging in there. All right, got the cap off on the first try. Just gonna do a quick little cleanup check. Nothing too major. Okay, so let's get this one poured in the glass. Our trusty stout glass here. All right, quite thick, quite dark. Gonna go a little more aggressively down the middle, give it a decent chance at forming a head here. Does seem pretty active in terms of carbonation. I can see it rushing up as I'm pouring this. So we'll see how long that head sticks around. All right, that is poured. About a foot away from this beer, I can tell you it does have a very pronounced aroma. It's the barrels that really jump out of that glass right out at you. So visually, pitch black as expected, absolutely pitch black. Head, more or less, already kind of got out of the way, but as expected, a little bit of cling, a little pat on the top. We're going to get right up for a full proper sniff. Oh, wow, yeah. You know, I really don't remember this beer. I remember having one, but this smells great. You can really smell the barrels and the coffee. That's the two dominant aromas coming off of this. You can smell some underlying earthiness, roastiness from the malt bill, but it is very dominant with the barrels and very dominant with the coffee. Very pronounced aroma, and it smells absolutely fantastic. So this beer looks the part. Let's just jump in and see what this 2020 double barrel version is about. Ooh, that is intensity of flavor. Big beer. Wow. That is big. That is properly big. Ooh, man. That is tasty and huge and pungent. Huge and pungent. It really is far more intense than you would anticipate for a 10% beer. I mean, this feels like 15, 16%. Just that intensity of flavor. It is vast. So, what hits you up front is actually really the combination of the coffee and the malt bill first, and then within about a second, the barrels really come in and hit as well. And it's honestly exquisitely balanced. This beer is almost equal parts of all of these unique voices coming through all at once at the same intensity. It's malt bill, coffee, barrels, and they all come through equally cleanly, absolutely delicious. Delicious together. This malt bill in particular, I am extremely impressed with. I absolutely love it. This is very, 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 very deeply dark, richly roasted malts. It is bringing in mind a ton of these char-like elements. There's this one, it's obviously coffee as well. A ton of coffee in there, really deep roast. So between the malt bill and the coffee itself, this is one of those where it's like a deep Italian or French roast coffee bean, you know, right on the edge of being burned, just really earthy, really charry, Doesn't taste smoky. There's no Rauch beer-like quality in here, but it's really deep. It's really roasty. It's really earthy. Absolutely delicious. Fantastic malt bill. Pairs just wonderfully, absolutely wonderfully with this coffee. The barrel as well. This is a double barrel version. They use one specific bourbon, one specific whiskey. They kind of blend a little bit together. The whiskey maybe takes on some more subtle grain-like and slightly sweeter kind of notes, whereas the bourbon on this one at least feels to me like maybe some of the char from the barrel is imparting itself onto the malt bill and the coffee, and maybe just taking a little bit of a lighter side. But it's very distinctly whiskeys and just absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to jump back in for body and mouthfeel, let everything re-intensify. We're going to talk about this finish, but absolutely delicious beer. I don't remember if I liked the first version as well as this, but this is huge. Unbelievably good beer. Take two. I would say that's a medium to medium heavy body. It's not super oppressive. 10% is not a low ABV, but it's not, a 13, 14, 15% either. It maybe feels a little less robust to me than I would expect even for 10%. The mouthfeel has a good bit of resistance to it. It feels more or less what I expect for a 10%. It's maybe slightly off, maybe slightly less resistant, but the body and the mouthfeel don't feel too far off the mark really. But really nice. Nice body, nice mouthfeel. On second sip, that re-intensification, it's just doubling down on everything I got on the first sip. It's just that big burst of roasty malt and the coffee followed immediately behind the barrel, and then they all have like equal voice in this, and it just holds. There is a true intensity of flavor here. It is bold, it's in your face, it just punches you right out of the gate as soon as you swallow, and it holds that same intensity for a good 10-15 seconds before a very slow decay. In terms of the finish on this beer, it's extremely long. It's not dry at all. It's extremely long. It's very much lingering earthiness, char, coffee, and still a little suggestion of that barrel on the end. And there's a nice kick of bitters on this beer. This big roasty malt bill, that deeply roasted coffee, it is nice. This is a big beer. It's got a ton of flavor. They all are working beautifully together. It's just incredibly balanced. I absolutely love this one. I'm going to take my time sipping on this beer, come up with my scores. When we come back, we'll get this one ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Fathers Brewing's Double Barrel Wheelhouse, a doubly barrel aged with bourbon and whiskey barrels, coffee Imperial Stout clocking in at 10% ABV. Fathers Brewing is based in Valparaiso, Indiana. So starting with the aroma, this was just one of those classic, huge Imperial barrel-aged beers. The barrels and the coffee and the hugely roasted malt bill all jumped out of the glass from a good foot and a half away. You got right up on it. You could really pick it all up. And it almost smelled equal parts in the aroma. It was absolutely fantastic. Aroma gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the taste on this beer was superb. It was far roastier than I anticipated, both in terms of the malt bill and in the coffee, and it was big and huge and bold and in your face. The barrels were also there. This was one of those beers that, just like in the aroma, the taste was the same thing. It was really equivalent parts. The roasted malt and the coffee did hit you first, then within that first second the barrels hit, and then they were all hanging out basically at even parity. You could fully taste the roast and the coffee, the roasted malt that is, the coffee and the barrels, all on an equal playing field. Nothing really vying for attention. It was just beautifully balanced. The taste was absolutely delicious. Taste gets a 10 out of 10. For the body, overall I thought this was above average, but it wasn't quite as robust as I did expect. Body gets a 7 out of 10. For the mouthfeel was nearly exactly what I expected. You could feel a good bit of resistance, well above average, but it wasn't quite precisely there for my estimation for a 10% Imperial Stout. Didn't miss it by much. The mouthfeel gets a 9 out of 10. For the finish, this was one of those classic extremely long finishes. Barrel-aged stout, big, bold, pungent, in-your-face flavors right out of the gate. And it lasted all the way to the end of each sip, and it was just tons of roast, earthiness, lingering coffee, and a little bit of the barrel still on the back end. Just kept going and going and going. Finish gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one was okay. Wasn't great, wasn't bad, just kind of average. Head and retention gets a 5 out of 10. For the appearance, this was textbook Imperial Stout, pitch black, 10 out of 10. For the balance, I spoke about this when talking about the flavor, but yeah, the balance on this was top tier. Every bit of that coffee, every bit of both of the different barrels they used, the underlying malt bill, the yeast strain, the hops, everything was in perfect harmony. Nothing vying for attention. Everything came through perfectly clearly. That is exactly how to balance a beer. Balance, perfect 10 out of 10. Filling in the intangible, subjectively, I loved it. This was another classic, great, really, really well done Imperial Coffee Barrel-Aged Stout, 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, this beer swept it in nearly every category, lost just a tiny handful of points in some, most notably head and retention. Again, poured at home, it is what it is. I'm sure pulled off of a proper tap from a bar, it would be a different story, so I'm not going to bash the beer for that. In the grand scheme of things, as an example of what a big Imperial Coffee Stout and barrel-aged at that is, this is about as good as any I could point to. Absolutely top tier. If you love big Imperial Coffee Stouts, barrel-aged stouts, this is one absolutely worth your time. I don't know exactly where my ratings were for the 2018 single barrel-aged version, but if it was anything like this, I'm sure I rated it top tier as well. This is a truly spectacular beer. I would recommend it to anybody. Example of the style did get a 10 out of 10, which brings the total score on Fathers Brewing's Double Barrel Wheelhouse to a 91 out of 100. Guys, this is just a fantastic beer. There's nothing more I can say about it. If you like these big, bold, in-your-face beers, look no further because this absolutely did the job. This is a beer, it looks like that they maybe tweak a little bit, but they release every year. This is the 2020 double barrel-aged version. Absolutely phenomenal. I loved it just as well as I loved the first example of this beer, single barrel-aged, I had a couple of years ago. Absolutely fantastic. Well worth your time to seek if you can get your hands on this one. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit the bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.